Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, students of all ages. Welcome to the Rockefeller Center's first public program of the winter term of 2011. My name is Andrew Samwick, and I am the director of the Rockefeller Center and a professor of economics here at Dartmouth. For the past 2 years, I have been teaching and developing a course on the public policy challenges facing local communities. It covers a range of topics, including education, housing, transportation, crime, and the environment. But the topic that encompasses all of the rest is poverty. While we may talk about a national poverty rate, poverty as a public policy challenge has a decidedly local face to it. There are people in our communities who simply can't earn enough income to sustain themselves or their families. And if poverty is not evident in our very insulated and privileged community of Hanover, one doesn't have to travel very far to find it. It is a mistake to think that money sent from the federal government by itself is going to lift people out of poverty. That process, too, has a decidedly local face to it. There are two reliable paths out of poverty, reliable but not easy. The first is education. We live in a world of technology and ideas, and education is the key to accessing that world and making your way in it. The second is entrepreneurship. When the world doesn't offer you what you would like, undertake to make a change through a business enterprise. Start something new. Let people pay you for selling them something that is a better product or service. Common to both paths as they are implemented through public policies is that they are sometimes thought to be out of reach in areas of concentrated poverty, like our central cities. This sort of hope and despair is what perpetuates poverty and makes it a vicious cycle from generation to generation. To break this cycle, it takes people in the community who believe otherwise and who are willing to work hard enough to see to it that such a belief is validated. We are very fortunate to have such a person with us today to speak about education and entrepreneurship. Since 2002, Amini Kajunju has been the executive director of a private nonprofit organization called Workshops in Business Opportunities, or WIBO for short. Founded in 1966 in Harlem, WIBO's mission is to enable small business owners and budding entrepreneurs from underserved communities to obtain financial success by starting, operating, and building successful businesses that develop economic power, provide jobs, and improve communities. Its signature program is a comprehensive 16-week workshop, How to Build and Grow a Profitable Business, offered several times a year in underserved locations around New York City. Through all of its programs, WIBO serves over 1,500 entrepreneurs each year. Under Ms. Kajunju's leadership, WIBO has seen a 50% increase in corporate and foundation funding. She's helped modernize the workshop's curriculum and has forged new partnerships with community leaders and civic organizations. WIBO helps entrepreneurs at all stages of business development and connects them together through alumni network services. Among her many accolades and activities, Ms. Kajunju is the recipient of the Network Journal magazine's 40 Under 40 Achievement Award and was a team leader for the William H. Clinton Foundation's Small Business Initiatives. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations with an emphasis on economic development from Brigham Young University and a master's degree in Public Administration with a concentration in Finance and Management from New York University. Prior to joining WIBO, Ms. Kajunju served as a program manager at the International Executive Service Corps, an all-volunteer organization providing free consulting services to businesses in developing countries, where she recruited and managed volunteers who assisted small to medium businesses in the fisheries, clothing, and mining industries in Southern Africa. Before beginning our presentation, I'd like to briefly acknowledge that the funding for our public program today comes from the Portman Family Fund at the Rockefeller Center, which was established precisely to enable us to explore the connections between entrepreneurship and public policy. Today's program is also part of Dartmouth's annual celebration of Martin Luther King Jr., whose dreams for America are helping to be made into reality through tireless work of organizations like WIBO and leaders like Ms. Kajunju. In recent years, the Rockefeller Center has had the opportunity to play a small part in the WIBO organization. About 10 years ago, WIBO branched out to also serve the Bridgeport, Connecticut community. With the support of Mike Jackson, a member of the Dartmouth class of 1962, and a former chairman of the Rockefeller Center's Board of Visitors. We have sponsored interns at WIBO in Bridgeport and look forward to participating in future efforts to grow WIBO's impact on communities across the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. Please join me in welcoming Amini Kajunju.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew, for that really, really nice introduction. I don't know what's typically done here in this space, but what I like to do is I'm going to make some comments and I'm going to give you my thoughts about this world of entrepreneurship and education and this issue of sort of, creating wealth, reducing poverty. And then after that, I hope that we can have a really robust conversation, because that's really what I'm better at. I'm terrible at speeches. I can't make speeches. I rather talk to you and discuss with you about these issues. And I suspect that you're here because you care about education, you care about entrepreneurship, or you want to learn more and you want to participate in a discussion about these issues. So just personal, I want to kind of give you my personal story. I was actually born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I came to America with my parents at the age of 9. My father came to study to get a PhD in economics at the University of Colorado Boulder. So that was my first introduction to the United States, Boulder, Colorado, in the middle of October, coming from a tropical country. But you know, what an experience it was. Obviously, two very different cultures, two very different climates, but what brought us to America was the search for education. And prior to that, my father and the whole family, many years before, had gone to Japan for my dad to get an education. That's where he's got his MBA from Osaka University, and then he came here to get a PhD in economics. So the search for education has been a common thread in my life, and you know, in the life of my siblings. So this issue of education is very close to home, because you know we sacrifice you know, time, family, and money to come to the United States to seek you know, more education. So came here, and I didn't speak a word of English. We were put in a school immediately. I mean, literally like 3 days after we came to America, we were put in a school, and there was a French teacher who taught us English while we were attending classes. And again, what an amazing experience that was. And I know that, you know, America is a country of immigrants, and you know, my story is not that extraordinary. A lot of kids come here at that age and are, you know, quickly have to assimilate into the American culture. So needless to say, in pursuit of education, you know, we stayed here for a couple of years, and then, you know, my father felt like he would probably be happier and would earn more money if we went back to Africa. So I know that that's typically not how people see Africa, that you actually would earn more money in Africa than you would here. But that was the case for my dad, because that's where he grew up, and that's where his networks were, and that's where he felt most comfortable, and that's where he felt like he could really thrive. So this is where the entrepreneurship sort of comes in my personal story. And so we moved to Liberia, and there my father became CFO of a startup, and it was called Rainbow Industries, and it was basically to use I think a company that everybody would be familiar with. It was sort of the Procter & Gamble of Liberia, of West Africa in particular. this company produced, manufactured soaps, detergents, etc., for the Liberian and West African market. And my father ran the company, and he was hired by the entrepreneur that started it. And it was a really wonderful thing to see. And my dad really used that opportunity to show us that the importance of starting a business. And you know, because of Rainbow Industries, 200 people were well fed, had a job, and you know, made enough money to take care of their families. And so we were in that environment for a couple of years, and you know, to torture us, my father, he would take us there, especially in the summers, take us to his job, and we would have to do work for free, because that's what he could do that. But so watching him work and watching, you know, the employees work and produce the soap, and then seeing the soaps and the detergents in the market was a really great education for us to see that process. So now in pursuit of education, we were very happy in Liberia. It was before the Liberian War had started. It was a great place to live, and I personally thought I would live in Liberia. I'd go to college there and build my life there. But about a year before the war started, my dad decided to send me back to the United States so I can go to college. And so again, another sacrifice was made to separate the family and bring me to the United States so that I can pursue an education. And so I did that, and sort of this is where I've lived ever since. I tell you all of these things because it really speaks to how and why this work is really is a passion for me, and also this issue of education, entrepreneurship. It's not just an American issue, but it's a global issue. All over the world, people are seeking a way to create wealth, to get out of poverty, using one of these two things: education or entrepreneurship, or the combination of both. And the issue in America, as developed as it is still around access, right? How well are we giving people access to really good education, or access to business training and loans and tax credits? The list goes on, to help people create a good life for themselves. Now, I've spent the last 15 years working with the entrepreneurship, and in particular, entrepreneurial education, which is where I've spent a lot of time. There's a lot to do in this space. There's microfinance, right? I mean, that's a conversation a lot of people are having around the world. The role that microfinance can play in helping people get out of poverty. There's pros and cons, and we can talk about that. I'll throw that out as a topic. It's adjacent to this notion of business training. One thing that microfinance doesn't emphasize is business training. There's a lot of the traditional microfinance is that you give typically a woman $100 to buy material so that they can build their business, sell more items, and hopefully over time build a viable business that gets her out of poverty, her and her family out of poverty. So that's an issue. But the issue of microfinance is also pertinent to the United States. Certainly in New York, we at WIBO, we work with a lot of microlenders. We work with institutions that provide loans to business owners that can't go to a traditional bank. They can't go to a Citibank. They can't go to a Chase. They don't have the credit. The business isn't mature enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe they're an immigrant. They just got to the United States and they don't have everything that they need to sort of take advantage of the traditional banking services. So I know that in New York, this is an ongoing conversation. Are we giving people enough access to this funding? How important is it, and do we give this funding before or after a training like what we offer at WIBO? So as Andrew said, WIBO was started in 1966. The founders of WIBO were really sort of revolutionary in their thinking. They really believed that you can teach people good business practices, and if they have the right product or service, they have a higher chance of being successful. It's not a guarantee, because there's so many things that go into successful business ownership. A lot of it does have to do with the individual and the product and the service and how it's delivered. But there are also, there's external factors. There's the economy. There could be a war. There could be hurricanes. There could be anything. So there are other things that sort of affect whether someone is successful or not. But the founders thought, well, if you gave good business training, good business education, that some people get through observing their family member or by working in a family business. That's a really great way to sort of learn the ropes. But we work in communities where there aren't a lot of people who have family-owned businesses that they can work in. So we sort of step in as that institution that provides this training, this role modeling of sorts. In the 60s, which is when the program was started, the two founders thought, they looked at education, they looked at employment, and they looked at entrepreneurship. And they thought initially about African Americans and the civil rights movement and the politics of exclusion. They thought, well, in communities where people were not being hired, even if they were qualified, if they were not being hired because of the color of their skin or their gender or anything else, maybe the answer to this high unemployment and sort of high frustration around how am I going to take care of myself and my family, maybe the answer was starting a business. And so they created the 16-week workshop to provide this education. And when you fast forward to 2011, it's amazing how now there are a lot more training programs to help entrepreneurs. They're still not enough, but there are increasingly more of them. But in the 60s, there weren't that many. There weren't any, actually. We don't brag about this enough at WIBO, but we're probably the first in New York to provide entrepreneurial training programs in underserved communities. We were in Harlem when it was quote unquote dangerous to be in Harlem. And we were in spaces in which, whites and blacks and Hispanics and Asians were helping each other build businesses. And it was really revolutionary in that way. I mean, I remember when I went to New York for the first time in the early 90s, my professor said, don't go up to Harlem, you'll get hurt. I'm like, what? So there was this perception. I mean, so imagine if that was the perception in 92. Think about it in 1966, in 1967, or in the 70s when things were really rough. But the founders of WIBO and all the volunteers that work with us were really steadfast in their conviction that we needed to put these racial tensions aside and really focus on helping people build businesses and create wealth. So today, Warren Buffett, great he's not a multi-millionaire, he's a billionaire, right? He's a billionaire. Let me get the numbers right. He's a billionaire. He's jumped into the business training bandwagon. He is a board member of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, which looks and feels like WIBO. They took it from us, and we need to get credit and money or something. In Goldman Sachs' attempt to make themselves look better, they have thrown $50 million to train small business owners in New York through the community college system. So they have chosen LaGuardia Community College to be the institution where individuals take a 12-week program. Ours is 16, theirs is 12, and out of it, create a plan, take some decisions that will take the business to the next level. So it's becoming, this whole notion of educating entrepreneurs is really becoming a mainstream notion. While we've been in the trenches for a very long time, and we've known that it's a very good idea and it's a very helpful idea. But now, the Warren Buffetts of the world are also thinking the same, and colleges and universities and community colleges are increasingly teaching people how to build businesses and how to write good business plans. So let me ask you a question. How many African American business people, successful, famous business people do you know? Just name, if you think of a name, just throw it out. Oprah. Why do we think Oprah is an entrepreneur? Because she's self-made, right? She started from scratch. Okay. Besides Oprah? Tyler Perry. And why do you mention him? Why do you think he's an entrepreneur? What makes him an entrepreneur?
Same deal, I guess he also just started in the streets and set up his own business in the entertainment industry. Yeah. And I think,
and he owns everything. He owns a studio that he makes his movies in. So he's definitely an entrepreneur. Who else? Tyra Banks. Okay, actually we're trying to honor her for our 45th anniversary. If you know her, let us know. We're trying to get her. She would be great to get. But anyway, yes, Tyra Banks. What makes you think she's an entrepreneur?
I mean, she started as a model in the fashion industry, and then she's started her own shows, and then she's gone on to be one of the creators rather than one of the actors in the industry.
So, right, less much, not so much take a picture of me, but now she's out there creating jobs, right? Creating shows, and yeah, she's a creator now, right? Which is what an entrepreneur does. They create. Who else? Any other? How about Hispanic? Successful, famous Hispanic entrepreneurs? No? Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I asked the question because I think one of the things that makes WIBO unique is that we have this 16-week workshop, and we have other programs. We have a legal clinic, we have an accounting clinic, we teach people QuickBooks training. One of the things that we found is many entrepreneurs don't keep really good records. That's part of the reason why they don't grow. Because when you don't keep good records, and then you're ready to go to Chase, and they ask you for a bunch of numbers and you don't have them, that doesn't make them feel very good. So they don't have a lot of confidence in you. So anyway, we do a lot of things. We give a lot of education to our entrepreneurs. And but one of the things that I think that sets us apart, let's say from a Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program, is that the volunteers, the people who teach the 16-week modules, are African Americans, are Hispanics, are Asian, are white. Our entrepreneurs get to see themselves in other successful entrepreneurs. You hear what I'm saying? So they get to go to take the class in Harlem, and we work very hard. We spend a lot of time finding entrepreneurs, African American entrepreneurs, some who have taken our workshops and gone on to become very successful, or even those who haven't taken our workshops, we want to give the time to teach a marketing class, okay, or teach a cash flow class, or teach a personnel class. That role, that seeing yourself in another person is really a powerful way for people to say, I can do that. Okay, I can do that. He was sitting in this chair like me 5 years ago. He took this 16-week workshop. He made it, and now he's back teaching marketing. it's really powerful, and we really value that process. You know, I think human nature hasn't changed. I think we all like to see, you know, when I first came to this country, I toyed for 2 seconds. I wanted to be a journalist. And I wanted to see African American female journalists. I didn't see any. So I was like, is it possible? Could I be a journalist? Is that okay? And the only person that at that time, I mean, most of you are too young, but Connie Chung, anybody know Connie Chung? Yes. I used to look at her and I used to think, oh, I could be like her. I could be like Connie Chung. And it's not, you know, it's not that the let's say the Caucasian, you know, newscasters were not important. I mean, Jane Pauley was one of my favorites. In fact, one of my coworkers now used to work for her, and I've been pushing her so I can meet with her because I just used to love her so much. But it was important for me to see that there was someone that either looked like me or was in the minority group that went through the ranks, and that was possible. And so role modeling is really, really, really key to it's part, I think, of what we need to do as a society to help people understand that they can achieve things. They can get to that point. It's possible. So the other thing that you know, one of the questions that, you know, Andrea and I talked about was what problem is WIBO trying to solve? So we've been trying to solve the civil rights movement issue of unemployment and sort of the politics of exclusion. So we've been trying to deal with that. We've been trying to deal with, in a small way, I mean, we by no means are solving the issue completely, but we're playing a role. The MLK dream of equal access to jobs, to funding, to education, to housing. The issue that many among us thought the government wasn't really doing enough. Remember, we're a private, nonprofit organization. We have very little affiliation with the government. We've only received 2 government grants in our history, and it's been under my tenure. We received, you know, one grant in 2006, and we'll be receiving another one this year. But we're private, and we're able to sort of do what we think is important, and not necessarily, you know, have to listen to the government if we don't want to. That's given us some level of freedom that we enjoy, but it is, you know, there is money in government, and those who are able to have access to it have more resources. But we've felt that being able to provide the products and services that we think are important without having to answer to, you know, lots of entities was more important to us. The other problem that we've been trying to solve is the issue of business failures. And it's big. Most businesses fail. That's the truth. African American, Hispanic businesses fail even more. And, you know, there's a lot of question about why that is. There have been some talk, some study, nothing really super in depth, but some of the things that we've heard and we know are, you know, issues of access to money, access to proper business education, either through family or through the type of work that WIBO is doing. We also know that a lot of African and Hispanic communities, you're taught from a very young age to seek an education, right? To go to college and then get a job. And that's really, really key. And it's very important. And there's obviously absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the question of starting a business like Mark Zuckerberg at 23, you know, it's not something that's highly encouraged in some of our communities. You know, the path to success is education. And in a small way, WIBO is also trying to say the path to success could also be entrepreneurship, and it could really have some powerful effect on a community. When you look at the demographic of the average WIBO graduate, 85% of our participants are African Americans, 70% are female, 50% earn less than $30,000 a year in New York City. I mean, that tells you something. 90% have at least one dependent. So you earn less than $30,000 a year and you have at least one dependent. You know, you do the math, you don't have a lot to work with. 30% are employed part-time, and about 30% are unemployed. So this is, you know, this now we have individuals who don't fit this description. We have, you know, we have people who earn a good living and you know, are able to take care of themselves pretty well. But generally, this is sort of the demographic that we're dealing with. So the other thing that I need to mention is about 40%, and this is maybe surprising, especially after what I've just told you, have college degrees, right? So you have a college degree, but you're not really earning that much for whatever reason. And you want to build a business to either supplement your income, okay, or to create a business that's going to be your main source of income. So our participants are coming to us, they've sacrificed a lot actually. So it's really, there's a potential of high sacrifice. If the business doesn't work, they've spent time and money into this business, and it's more painful than if, you know, a Bill Gates hadn't started, you know, when he started Microsoft, he failed miserably. I mean, I think he would have been fine nevertheless, right? We think he would have been just okay. But for some of our participants, if they put a lot of money, they put up maybe their house, they put up their apartment, you know, they take out a line of credit to start a business. So this is serious. This is not child's play. This is really serious. But here's some of the impact that we've been able to make. Excluding the owner, WIBO graduates add about 2 jobs to the economy of New York. 55% of them stay in business after 5 years. The national average is about 28. 52 of them report that the business is a main source of income. 80% of our participants come to us from recommendations from other participants. So we have a really amazing word of mouth. 60% of our faculty members, the people who teach all of our classes and all of our seminars, are WIBO graduates. And we really, really think that that's really amazing. What do entrepreneurs do for the economy? I don't know if you guys know the stats, but the stats are pretty amazing. They employ half of the private sector jobs. About 13, they create 13 more patents than big firms. So small businesses, you know, depending on who what your definition is, you know, this says under 500, you know, under 50, under 100, under 10. This is where the innovation is happening. This is where the job growth is happening. 52% are home-based. A lot of our entrepreneurs start their businesses at home, and then over time, you know, when it grows, then they may go to a brick and mortar if it makes sense. Over the past 10 years, they've created 55% of all new jobs. So we know this. America is sort of the bedrock of America's economy are small businesses, and we really need to do everything in our power to make sure that we're making, you know, that process continue, and that we are encouraging and creating opportunities for small businesses to grow. here are some of the things that we've learned over the past 10 years that I've been at WIBO. Volunteers are a sort of a powerful force for efficiencies and goodwill. And it's, for example, the program at Goldman Sachs, they use paid staff, paid people to teach the classes. And, when you have $50 million, you can do that. But what we've discovered, certainly over 45 years, not even over the past 10 years, is that if you are able to recruit people who have hands-on experience in running and failing in a business, and you bring them into a workshop setting to teach other entrepreneurs and to conduct conversations, really, about various business topics, about the curriculum that we've put together, it's actually an amazing way to disseminate this information. And the returns are tenfold. Some of our volunteers have been with us for 20 years. Our chairman of the board has been with us for 40 years. So it doesn't feel like a job. It really feels like you're giving back and you're fueling, you're helping another person become a better entrepreneur, and that's a really powerful feeling. The other thing that we've learned is that even with the internet, right? I mean, social media, everything is on the web. We all live and die by the web. It's the everything of our lives. However, if you are a business person and you forget that the web is not the end all be all, then you find yourself in a lot of trouble. We have graduates who are doing all types of businesses, and not everyone is on the web. I know it's hard to believe, but not everyone is on the web. And when you're marketing for a product or a service, you really have to know your customer. And even as an organization, we've had to learn that. We have such a plethora of clients, so to speak, and some of them are on the web and some of them are not. And so we've had to, definitely have a robust web presence and a robust social network marketing presence, but we've also had to be present in the print media. We still send out newsletters, physical newsletters, so things like that. And I think even businesses have to adjust and really make sure that you know who you're talking to and you know how to find them. The other thing that we've learned, and this continues to be confirmed, is that you can teach people good business practices. You really can, and that can be taught, because the thinking is always that entrepreneurs are born. You're just born like that, and then you'll make it because you were born like that. But you can teach people good business practices, especially when we're talking about communities where there's not a lot of successful entrepreneurs around, and this is a very new concept in terms of how do I run a business, how do I make it successful, how do I make it profitable. Those things can be taught over time. And we're learning, and I think this is not a surprise, that there's still a lot of work to do. African Americans, for example, the average African American business grosses $72,000. That number needs to increase. While the average non-Hispanic, non-African American business averages, the gross revenue average is $495,000. That's a really big gap. So there's a lot of work that we still need to do. And when I asked you, of course there are a lot of Hispanic businesses all over the country doing quite well. But in the name of role modeling, when I asked you, who are the successful Hispanic-owned businesses, we couldn't name any, right? We need to change that, because I think it's a powerful tool to be able to name a few and to use to see them in our local communities and then to see them on a national stage. Those two things, those two set of images are quite important for the new generation, for the next generation to know I'm capable. I know I can do that. So one thing we were lucky about in New York is that we do see a lot of locally owned, minority-owned businesses. Not enough, certainly not enough, but there's, if you look hard enough, there's enough of them, and you can sort of, talk to them. And at WIBO, we get to see a lot because, that's all we do. We deal with entrepreneurs all day long. So those people who are affiliated with WIBO get to see this, and it's really powerful. I think that's it for me. I now want to open it up for Q&A, and I hope that we can have a discussion about just some of the things that I've brought up. Thank you very much. Back there.
What do you think of some sort of forced entrepreneurship in urban agglomerations around the developing world where 60–70% of urban economies are informal, and these people are called entrepreneurs, but more or less they're just trying to getting from day after day, but barely having actual businesses, and I'm thinking of inefficiencies and so forth. So I'm curious of your opinion of that.
Did everybody hear that question? Yeah? Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's why, I brought up microfinance. One of my challenges with microfinance is that it does encourage this informal sector to stay to grow, because most of these entrepreneurs that you're talking about really rather have jobs. They rather have a really good job in a nice company. And this and then this issue of education and entrepreneurship, most of these individuals maybe did not get enough education to go and get the jobs. And of course, we're talking about economies in which there is 70–80% unemployment. So they're super educated, get the really good jobs. I mean, I'll tell you a brief personal story from my country. Again, it's a sort of this cross-section of education entrepreneurship. I don't know, any of you have heard of Moy Ibrahim? Yes, somebody, oh good. Cell phone, Celltel, oh I'm glad, good, okay, great. Dartmouth is doing its job, no. So Moy Ibrahim is an entrepreneur. He started a company called Celltel, which is now Zen. He's a Sudanese national. He was an engineer. And to make a long story short, he is really one of the people who is responsible for bringing cell phones to Africa. When he started his business, he was told by investors, Africans don't need cell phones, don't even bother, this is crazy, what's wrong with you? This is not gonna work, I mean, just leave it alone, okay? This is a useless, way for you to spend your time. Go back to London, work at that great job, and just let it go. And he heard this everywhere he went. But he was steadfast, and he created Celltel, which employs, close to 30,000 people on the African continent. And it's a favorite employer in Congo. Everybody wants to work, which is now Zen. They've been bought out by, he sold Celltel for, I think, $5 billion or something, even maybe probably higher. Anyway, he sold Celltels in the billions of dollars to an Indian company. And in Congo, everybody wants to work for Celltel, Zen. I mean, there's only so many spots at that company. And this is a country with 65 million people. And there are 6 million people living in Kinshasa. Zen cannot hire all of them. But everybody wants a job at Zen. Because of Moy Ibrahim, he created this company, and now it's a job creator, and it's a wonderful place to work. You get professional training, you get a great salary, you get benefits. Who doesn't want that? And Zen, who do they hire? Highly educated Congolese. If you don't have a college degree, don't even apply there. That they're not interested. So that really limits, right, how many people can work there. And you find yourself, an economic condition in which not enough people have jobs. But if there were more Moi Ibrahims in Africa, we can reduce this unemployment little by little, and we can give people an opportunity to create wealth through education, but also we can help people see that you too can become a successful business owner like a Moi Ibrahim. So, I think to me, the answer to the problem that you just discussed is we need to start more businesses all over the world. In developing countries, certainly, that's going to be the path to prosperity. And then through those small businesses, jobs are going to be created and wealth is going to increase. Microfinance really supports the informal sector, and they're not necessarily, this sector is not necessarily a job creator. It does create an opportunity for the individual, and that's great, but it doesn't really go beyond that in most cases. So, and then another thing related to Zen, last time I was in Congo, I met this lady who used to work at Zen, and she got tired. She said, I don't want to work there anymore. I went as high as I could, and she quit, had saved up her money over time, and she started a little hardware store. She goes to China, buys, all of this material for her hardware store. She puts it in her store, and she sells her items, and she has really big dreams for herself. And I really believe that because she worked in this environment in which, she thought people was thriving, she knows the history of the company. I mean, all those things play a role. And now she thinks, I can do something. I can make it. And by the way, she is borrowing money from Finca, which is a microfinance corporation, at, get this, at 100% interest annual. She does it because that's pretty much the only game in town. There are other people, there are other institutions coming into the space, but when she needs $5,000 to go to China, buy materials, and come back, she goes to Finca for that. So anyway, there's a lot to do in this space. Yes.
You talked about early access and how that's really important, and you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg and how in kind of diverse communities or underprivileged communities, it's not encouraged so much to kind of consider entrepreneurship at early ages. I was just wondering if WIBO has considered structured programs that they would target towards secondary schools or undergrads to kind of introduce the language of business earlier. And to kind of build motivation or drive for individuals.
No, that's a really good question. It's a tug of war at WIBO. I mean, we've been working with adults for 45 years, and we get a lot of requests sort of for what you just said, why not go into the schools early? I mean, still do the adult thing, but go into the schools early and start teaching, start planting that seed, We have done some work around this. We were highly affiliated with the Night and Day Comprehensive High School, and it's a non-traditional high school. It's a high school that takes in maybe teenagers that already have kids, or teenagers that are new to the country and don't quite speak English well. Teenagers just in sort of special situations. And we didn't do the full 16-week. We did, we took maybe 4 or 5 of our modules and taught it in that high school. And we were the founder of WIBO was really good friend with the executive director. And so we did a lot of work that way. Unfortunately, once the executive director left, the high school wasn't super interested in what we were doing. So, that didn't go very far. The other thing is we actually have a loose affiliation with NIFTY, which is an organization that introduces entrepreneurship to students from the age of 12 to 18. And they're really successful. They've done amazing work in this space. Now, what challenge they have is that when the kids that they've introduced entrepreneurship to go off to college or do whatever after high school, they don't really have a good mechanism for what to do with them afterwards. So we've actually signed a memorandum of understanding with NIFTY that when these now, maybe they talk to them, you know, they intervene when they were 15, right? So maybe they're now 20, and maybe they didn't go to college, right? Or maybe they did and they came back home, which happens. And when, you know, to funnel those guys to us, okay, to send them to us, and we can sort of continue the work that NIFTY was doing. So, I mean, your point is fair. Andrew and I actually talked about it today. We would need, if we were to do it, we'd need to think about making some structural changes. But I think, I mean, your point is very fair, very fair. Oh, we have a gentleman here. Oh, no, we'll come down here.
So you talked about the, on the one hand, you said we think we can teach business skills.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very important part of what you do. And you also spoke about how it's important to have mentors who can show the way, who I've been where you are, I can do this. One of the things we've talked about a little bit in class is kind of, or that's come up in readings from class, is the split between kind of the psychological reasons for, you know, sustained kind of lack of opportunity versus the more harder kind of technical side. And it sounds like you're addressing both, but I was wondering kind of, and this is an arbitrary question, but kind of which you thought was more important, or kind of how they interact with each other, or which one was more in need, you know, is it kind of inspiration, or, you know, kind of showing the way, or is it, you know, there are certain skills that you have to be able to master?
You just have to have,
Yeah.
That's a really good question. It's actually, I mean, I think it's an ongoing debate. I think from what I've seen, you need both. You need both. You know, when I look at some of our success stories, you know, these individuals, you know, I'll pick on George and Fareed at Bogota Bistro in Brooklyn. George and Fareed came to us. One of them had worked in the restaurant business for quite a long time, and knew the business in and out from working in it. They were partners, and I think George went to Fareed and said, you know what, I think we could start a restaurant on Fifth Avenue. There isn't a really good Latin American restaurant there, and I think we could really put something together. I have some thoughts. Would love to hear your thoughts about this, etc. Anyway, make a long story short, they decided that they wanted to go into business together. And the first thing that they did is they sought out programs to help them create a business plan and to sort of think about how do you manage a business. And they came to us. When we met with them, they didn't have a business. They took the 16-week workshop in central Brooklyn, right there in Bed-Stuy. And the volunteer that used to come there owned a business many moons ago. And she became their best friend. I mean, you know, they talked all the time. And, you know, besides, you know, all the other volunteers that came, but this lady sort of became their best friend, and, you know, they picked her brain all the time. But a few things you can already tell about George and Fareed, right? They're go-getters. They quickly understood the need, the fact that they didn't have all the information that they needed to really build this business, so they needed to go out and find it. They are, you know, they were sort of steadfast in their conviction. They took the workshop, then they completed it, then they used the business plan that they created with us. They applied for a business plan competition. They won $10,000. Okay, so you already see these are guys that go for it, right? They go for it, they put in the time, they put in the work. Why is that going to be necessary later? Because starting a restaurant is not fun initially. Don't, you know, it's such everybody wants to start a restaurant, but it is probably one of the hardest businesses to start. And I remember when they shopped around their business plan, a few banks turned them down because banks don't like to loan money to restaurants, especially startup restaurants. What? The failure rates are ridiculous. They finally found somebody who would invest in them. Debt, not equity, debt. And I remember when they would spend hours, because I used to go see, they found the space. It was, just looked awful. You go there now, it's a beautiful restaurant, but in the raw space was awful. And they spent hours, day in, day out, with the contractors. They were painting, and they were doing everything necessary to make this place look beautiful. Make a long story short, they're now doing, 6 years later, they're doing about $2 to $3 million a year in business. So for me, they had business, they had restaurant experience, which is important. They put in the time. So between the time that they started, they thought about the business, and by the time they opened it, it was about 2-3 years later, right? And then they spent, I mean, I remember we used to call Fareed and George, come and volunteer, come and they had no time. They spent literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in that restaurant. And now, about a year ago, I was talking to George. He's like, Amini, I can finally breathe. I feel confident enough to hire a manager, you know, and now we can have some of our nights off. Not many nights, but some. But you hear what I'm saying? So I think it's both. I think that's how you get to the $3-4 million and you employ 50 people, right? So I think it's a combination of both. We're going to come here because he's been, sorry. He's been wanting.
So my question goes a little back in time, I guess. I'm interested in how your experience was at the beginning. I know this predates you by quite a bit.
Yes.
But I
34
imagine
years.
yeah, exactly. So I imagine it must have been quite hard. I mean, you talked about, you know, the crime rates being high, probably not being that established that maybe people in Harlem or African Americans start their own businesses that much at that time. So how did you get this going? How did you get it started? Because now you're an established business, so I guess it's easier. You have your alumni come back and all.
Slightly easier, yeah.
Yeah, but so how do you get this started? That's my question.
That's a really good question. I wish the founder was here, but here are some of the things that I've heard. Okay, so obviously I've been there for 10 years, and you know I've heard many stories. So the founders of WIBO, by the way, one was white, the other one was black. One was an IBM executive who had left IBM to start his own consulting firm, and the other was one of the most prominent African American lawyers. He was one of the first sort of big shot lawyers of New York. Malulu Woolfolk was his name, and he's, I don't know if you've heard the name Percy Sutton, but you know, he's, you know, Charles Rangel. I don't know if you've heard that name. He's been in the news. So anyway, it's from that era. So they were both so committed to this that they kind of worked through all the setbacks. So a few things. One, Walter, who was the white founder, said we should have it for free forever. We should always provide this program for free. Mal said no. People should pay for it. They should pay something. Not the full, you know, our graduates don't pay the full price, the full market price. The full market price for our program is $4,000. If we didn't use volunteers. If we use volunteers, $1,000. How much? The most anybody will pay is $199. So if you do the math, my job is to fundraise $800 per person, $900 per person, depending on how much they're paying. So, for about the first 10 years, it was free. And then Mal just finally put his foot down and said, Walter, we must charge. I think we're sending the wrong message. You have to charge. They have to pay for something. Because when you don't pay for something, you don't value it. When it's given to you, you don't give it enough value. Walter wrote to 25 of his friends when he started the program and said, here's what I'm starting. I'd love for you to volunteer. I think you're a specialist in marketing. We're going to have a marketing module. In fact, I've written a draft Can you help me? Am I going down the right path? Can you help? So he did that with 25 of his friends. Luckily, 24 said, yes, I'll help you. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to read? One of them said, this is not going to fly. You're going to fail miserably. Call me in a year. You'll believe me. Well, 45 years later. Walter has 3 children, and we always joke that WIBO was his 4th and his favorite, because he spent basically all of his time working with Mal to get this program going, opening new sites, closing sites if it was necessary, just making the changes in the curriculum, constantly recruiting new volunteers, making sure that we're in the communities where we're needed. We're in the South Bronx, we're in Central Brooklyn, we're in Harlem, we're in Washington Heights, we're in Yonkers, we're in Lower East Side. So he really sort of pushed that. We must be in the communities where we're most needed, where we need to see more locally owned businesses. There were a lot of challenges. Walter, thank goodness, didn't really care about money. He cared enough, he cared to make enough to feed his family and himself, but nothing more. Thank goodness for that thinking, especially in the early years, because there just was not a lot of money. And he didn't like to fundraise. That was the other challenge. So he had to work with he had to do a lot with very little. In terms of personality traits, he had such a, Walter was the kind of person when you talk to him, whatever he tells you, you want to say yes to. So that was another part of it. He was just, the personality was such that after he explains it to you, you're like, okay, where do I sign? I don't have any time, I'm busy, but I'll do it because you've asked me to. So he had that personality, and that was really key, again, to get people involved. Now we're riding on that bandwagon a little bit, A lot of our volunteers recommend other volunteers to us, so it's this rippling effect that's really wonderful. We stayed small, and we stayed out of government's hair. That was the other, and that was a big Walter thing, Mal used to say, hey, we should go after this grant or that grant, and Walter would always say, well, if we did that, then they would ask us to change the curriculum and make it 2 weeks. And no, I really believe that if you really want to prove that you're ready to start a business, you got to put in the time. And each chapter is important, so we can't cut it down. So there was a lot of sort of back and forth on that. There were a lot of challenges probably that he doesn't share very often. But I think the key for me was that he was steadfast. He recruited some amazing people to join him. He and Mal worked really well together, so it was a team effort. And the 16-week workshop, the curriculum was actually quite solid, and they had worked on it over time. And if you just read it on its own, without the case studies and the volunteers, it's actually a pretty good workbook on its own. But I think it comes alive when you add the volunteers and the case studies. Yes, right here.
Could you describe the process of once graduates decide to start a business, how they access capital, and maybe how you advise them after they've left the program?
Yeah, that's a good question. So chapter 14 is financing. Why do you think it's towards the end? Huh? Because it's depressing? That's part of it. That's true. Because yes? Yes. That's the main reason. So he said you have to have a good idea, develop a good idea before you get money for it. So that's the main reason, is second to, it's the 14th chapter. And the 15th chapter is legal and ethics, legal issues and ethics. And then the 15th chapter is personal finance. So it ties in to your question, because we actually advise our entrepreneurs to really try to finance their business based on positive cash flow. We really try to push that, because it keeps you disciplined, right? When it's your own money, you use it better. you keep track of it, and you make sure that any net income that you make, you put it back into the business. In terms of advising about getting outside money, like I said before, we do have relationship with micro lenders. Many of our graduates just don't have good credit, or even if they have good credit, they don't have enough business experience, so they don't have enough time in business in order to access more traditional means of financing. And statistics show that probably 80% of most businesses are financed by the 3 F's. You know what they are? Family, friends, and fools. That's typically what happens. And then after those 3 people have vouched for your idea and they're willing to put their money into it, then a bank is happy to not happy, but it's easier for them to bring dollars to the pot. The other issue is that we're not really, most of our graduates are not attracted to venture capitalists or angel investors because they tend to be really small. We do have individuals who do seek angel investors and venture capitalists, but it's not a lot of them. I mean, another success story that we have is the Good Home Company. They're a $4 million company, and Christine got to $4 million over 10 years. She just slowly, she got $5,000 from her stepdad, and that's what she used to start the business. And 10 years later, she's a $4 million business. And I mean, I know she's taken loans, in the process, but it wasn't in the first 5 years. It was much later when she opened a retail space. She just recently opened a retail space. So we do connect our graduates with credit. We do have relationship with micro lenders and traditional banks. In fact, March, I can't remember the date, we're holding a loan fair. We're inviting about 20 micro lenders, banks, and alternative funders to a space that we've rented out. And we've done this in the past, and it's really successful. It's a really great way for our graduates to come and talk to individual providers and see which one of them is best, is best suited for their business. So we did it for 2 years in a row, and then the market tanked, and honestly, we could not get anybody on the phone. We could not get anybody on the phone. So we skipped a year. We actually skipped a year and a half, so to speak. And so we're starting again in March, and we're going to do that in March and also in August. So that's how we, bring people money or access to money. Is the lady here?
Is it on? Okay, sorry. My question is on the same lines. I wanted to know what institutions and support systems that you have set up when a lot of your students have invested everything and then it turns out to be a bad investment, or what really does happen to, I guess, the mental and psychological state of people that have put everything and then watched it, I guess, disappear in a sense.
Well, I mean, for those who come to our workshop, we start this conversation of really making sure that you're careful about where you're putting your money very early. I mean, literally chapter 1, we really start talking to people about, if they haven't started a business, to start small, and to so that, because a $10,000 mistake maybe you can live through, but a $100,000 mistake is a different idea, especially when you're talking about the demographic that we're dealing with. So we really ask our entrepreneurs to start really small, and so that and to grow gradually so that they make small mistakes and not big mistakes. I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't heard over the past 10 years a major catastrophic situation where somebody, mortgaged their house and it all fell apart. There is a business, we'd consider a success story. I'm not going to mention names. You might know her. No, she actually put up her house to start the business, and she wasn't really listening to some of the things we were telling her around the financing and around the pricing of her items. we shared with her, you know, over time that, you know, the pricing of her item may have been too high and she may not be able to move the item out of her stores, and she may find herself in serious trouble. We were very afraid because she put her house up. I mean, you know, and she moved into a really tiny apartment. Her husband agreed with the whole thing, and it was kind of a scary situation. But thank goodness, she's weathered that storm. She did reduce the price of her items. I'll tell you the product. I mean, she makes handmade dolls, and they're beautiful. In fact, they were featured in O magazine many years ago. And, you know, unfortunately, though, fortunately, she was featured in O magazine. Unfortunately, the doll that she featured, when she came back for some consulting work, when we ran the numbers on the dolls, she was actually underpricing those dolls and overpricing the dolls that she was selling in the store. So when, you know, people who saw it in the magazine, they placed tons of orders, but she was losing maybe $2 per doll. So anyway, she's rectified a lot of those things, and, you know, she's still going strong. She restructured her pricing, the way she priced her items, and they were more attractive to her customers. And I think she's been able to move a lot of her items out of the store and off her website. She was also featured actually in Martha Stewart Living, which was really exciting for her shortly after that, so that was great. But yeah, that's one of the cases that I remember that we were kind of, oh, we hope it all works out, but it did, so that's good.
I'm interested in hearing your vision for scale in kind of two dimensions. So the first is, I think, picking up on the question about capital. Where do you see your organization playing a bigger role in helping some of these entrepreneurs not just kind of create wealth, you know, in their own communities, but sort of grow in the way that CellTel has, becoming these larger organizations? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities you see there? And then second, for your organization, I know you've already expanded into Bridgeport. What do you see as your next steps in terms of scaling WIBO?
Mm-hmm. So I'll answer the second one first. We are in the process of taking the 16-week workshop through other cities. So we did do the Bridgeport thing about 10 years ago, and that's been working really well. And so actually, my colleague and I were just in Minnesota. We've just installed the 16-week workshop in an agency in the Twin Cities. And that just got started, and we're working out the kinks there, and we're really excited about it because the lady who's running it is just phenomenal. And then we're also looking at St. Louis, and, you know, Andrew and I were talking about this today, West Palm Beach. That sounds like a very strange place to go, right? We can talk about it offline. Madoff, maybe that give you an answer. No, and then we're looking at St. Louis. We're actually also looking at Houston, I believe. So, you know, and so we actually get a lot of requests. I mean, you know, a month doesn't go by where we don't get a call. Oh, I was on your website. Are you in Atlanta? And we have to say no. You know, I was on your website. Are you in San Antonio? No. So, you know, we're working very hard with some really experienced individuals who are going to help us get to some of these cities. And the question there is making sure we have the right local partners, right? That's the key, right? Without the right local partner, you can't go very far. So we're working on that, and that's sort of the next big thing for us. And we're really excited about it because, you know, it shows us, you know, does this program have legs outside of New York City, right? And if it does, you know, does it stay the same or does it have to change? We don't know, right? So we'll find out the answers to all these things in the next couple of years. To answer your second question, you know, this is something we've been talking about a lot, actually, for many years. We've been toying with this idea lately of taking our businesses that are doing $250,000 or more, $250,000 or more, and really sort of creating almost like an incubator setting for them. For those who want to grow, right? There's people who are at 250 and they're happy, right? I don't want to grow, I'm fine where I am. But for those who sort of want to go regional, national, or just, grow in some way, we want to create a program that speaks to that. And so we're not, I don't have the answers to that yet, but it's something that we're thinking about. And we thought 250 was a good number, that's a good number to sort of start with. Because the other thing is we have a wonderful, wonderful collaboration with EO. I don't know if you've heard of Entrepreneur Organization. It's an organization that works with businesses that are grossing $1 million or more. And EO is sort of like the WIBO for million plus businesses, because they too focus on education, on really supporting the entrepreneur, because they really believe that if the entrepreneur has solid skills, he or she can go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million. And so they have a lot of workshops and they have seminars and they invite these amazing entrepreneurs to come and talk to them. And then that whole issue of modeling, right? Christine Dimmick, who's one of our success stories, when she got to the millions, she went to EO. And I remember talking to her around that time, and she was like, Amini, I'm at the stage in my business where I want to know, what other women are doing, that are running businesses that are bigger than mine. How did they get there? How did they do that? That's really important to me right now. So she was, the EO has been great for her, and it's been great for a lot of people. And so EO it's become an aspirational organization to be a part of for our graduates. So we thought, if we start to talk to those who are doing 250, they may not be a lot of them, but just even if there's a small amount of them, let's start working with them and see if we can get them to 1 million so they can enter EO, right? Incidentally, EO has an accelerator program, and they start folks at 250. And they sort of talk to entrepreneurs that are grossing 250 or more, and they give them a training similar to ours, to help to see if they can get them to 1 million so they can become members, right? And so we've talked to them about us having a parallel program with our graduates, and we can actually, once we've gotten them to a certain level, send them to Accelerator if they're not quite the $1 million mark, and then get them into, So that's really exciting, and we're toying around with that idea right now. So to sort of answer your question around scale for these businesses, yeah. Any other questions? Good. No more questions. Well, thank you so much. I hope it's been good for you, and you've enjoyed our conversation. I've really enjoyed being here. I really want to thank Sarah for staying in touch with me and just getting everything organized. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if there were times I didn't get back to you quickly enough. But thank you. And Andrew, thank you. We met about a couple years ago, and I'm glad to see you again. And we've had the chance to talk, and it's been really wonderful. And thank you to everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you.